What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and with a lot of the big name free agents off the board, at least in terms of the fantasy relevant guys, I thought this would be a good opportunity to go through and kind of update my way too early 2025 rankings. So in today's specific video, we're going to be going through my top 15 running backs. I do think I moved a few guys around since the last time I did this, I think a few months ago. Also added a few dudes on to the end here to make it a top 15. So would love to know your thoughts. Who do you think is too high? Who do you think is too low? If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But let's just dive right into tier 1 here. And I think when I originally made this video, like right after the season, I believe I had Saquon Barkley in tier by himself. In this video, I actually have 3 guys in tier 1, and it's really not because I'm getting lower on Saquon Barkley. I just think all these guys are pretty similar. Kind of different situations, but I think they all belong in the same tier. So my RB1 is Saquon Barkley, my RB2 is going to be Bijan Robinson, and then my RB3 is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Now in 2024, Saquon was the running back 1 in points per game, Jahmyr Gibbs was the RB2, and then Bijan Robinson was the RB3. So they were the top 3 running backs last year, all heading into pretty similar situations, expecting great production again. For Saquon Barkley, I think what's going to kind of limit him from having like that truly insane 25 plus point per game upside is just the lack of receiving work. Like he's getting fine usage in the receiving game, but I wouldn't say this is like the perfect situation for him. He is a running back like he proved in his rookie season where he can rack up insane volume through the air. That's just not going to happen here with the Eagles. I do think he has the opportunity to improve on his touchdown production. Now, I don't think he's ever going to go nuclear in that department as long as the Eagles and Jalen Hurts are doing the tush push, but he scored 15 touchdowns last year, which is totally fine, but he was tackled at the 1 yard line 11 times, and none of those times where he was tackled at the 1 actually turned into Saquon Barkley touchdowns. So it's possible he gets a little bit more lucky, isn't getting taken down right at the 1 yard line, and he could deliver like a 17, 18, 19 touchdown season. Obviously, his usage is going to be strong. He's going to give you a ton of production on the ground. I think it's fair to have him, the favorite to run back as the running back 1 this year. Then for Bijan Robinson, just had a really strong workload last year, finally got unleashed after the disappointing rookie season. He was top 5 in carries, targets, rush yards, receiving yards, receptions, and target share. So handling a solid workload both on the ground and through the air, and then really ended the season on a tear. Kind of had a slower start, but in 10 of his last 12 games, he scored at least 20 PPR points. I think he's just going to carry that production into the 2025 season, and he had some big games with Michael Penix at quarterback, so I don't think that's going to change a ton here. And then for Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he definitely has some kind of capped upside with David Montgomery there. Like Saquon, Bijan Robinson, they are the clear-cut running back 1s. And I do think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be the running back 1, but he has a very capable, complementary back who's going to be taking some of the usage. But Jahmyr Gibbs has kind of proven that he can get by and produce with insane efficiency and the touchdown upside. He was number 2 in yards per reception. He was number 2 in yards per touch. He was, I believe, first in breakaway runs. And then even though a lot of people like to think like David Montgomery comes in, he vultures the touchdowns, he's the only one getting the goal line work, Jahmyr Gibbs was still 4th in red zone touches and actually led the entire NFL in touchdowns. So the touchdowns really were not a concern for Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I will say some of his point per game numbers are a little bit inflated because he had like those 3 monster weeks where David Montgomery was out. But that also kind of adds into the upside of a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, where if David Montgomery does go down, he kind of has like that weird handcuff upside while also just being like a top 3 back without it. So those are my top 3 guys, the 3 running backs I have in tier 1. Now moving into tier 2, this is probably where I start to stray away from consensus. Top 3, I think pretty in line with what most people are thinking. To start off tier 2 as my running back 4, I'm going to go with Christian McCaffrey. Now, if you're someone who's sitting there like shocked, how could you trust Christian McCaffrey? Like he burned me. He's burned his fantasy managers, I think like 3 of the last 5 seasons, just completely busted. Like, you are right. You're taking on a lot of risk when you are drafting Christian McCaffrey. And if he's just completely off your board, I don't blame you. I just think his upside is so high that I'm going to be taking swings on him. So like I'm someone who's not only playing in 1 league. If I'm playing in like 10 plus leagues, I'm going to want Christian McCaffrey at the bare minimum in one of them. And I probably want him in at least two, just because if he does hit, he has that league winning upside. Let's just like run through all his seasons since his rookie year. Rookie year was like solid, but he really was kind of unleashed in year two. So 2018, he averaged 24.1 points per game, was the running back two. Pretty much a league winner where you drafted him. Then in 2019, just an insane season, 29.3 points per game. Obviously, that was the running back one. He was a league winner. Then 2020, 2021, that's where he had the injury issues. Played a combined 10 games. If you're drafting him number one and he's just not on the field, he's probably tanking your season. Then 2022, he had 21 points per game, was the running back two in points per game. Another year where he could have been a league winner. And then 2023, 24.5 points per game, running back one in points per game. 2024, only plays in 4 games. So there's no like mid-level production with CMC. It's either he's out on the field, he's dominating, or he's injured and he's just kind of tanking your season. With the moves the 49ers have made, they've had to move on from a lot of guys this offseason. This offense is going to run through Christian McCaffrey as long as he can hold up. And if you pick him in the first round and he busts, like sure, that might be the end of that league. But like I said, as someone who's playing in a lot of different spots, I'm fine if he sinks me in one or two situations because I know that if he stays healthy, he's going to be an absolute monster. So CMC is going to be my running back 4. And if he's going like round 2, late round 1, I really think he's going to be an insane value just based on the upside he does bring. Now, continuing on with tier 2, one of my favorite guys here, someone who I really liked as a rookie, I liked him heading into last season, it is going to be Devon Achane. And he's kind of produced for fantasy in different ways in both of his seasons. Year 1, it was just elite efficiency. He averaged 7.8 yards per carry. He was clearly first in rushing yards over expected per attempt. And then in year 2, that efficiency kind of tanked, right? The offense was not great. You had the Tua injuries. The O-line just wasn't there. He didn't have the same breakaway opportunities. And he ended up adjusting and really thriving through just elite receiving upside. He was targeted 87 times, caught 78 of those for 592 yards. And on the season, like he was over 17 points per game. It was a nice year. When you actually isolate the games where he was playing with Tua, so 11 games with Tua at quarterback, he was averaging 22.6 PPR points per game. So he is going to be in the mix to be the running back 1. I think he's someone where maybe competition could come in and hurt him. I still think he's going to be the running back 1, but he doesn't really have the frame of someone who's going to be a workhorse back. So he's probably going to be sharing the backfield with someone else. I still think he has that RB1 upside. He has the big playability. If he can pair that receiving with the efficiency, I mean, we could be looking at like, a league-breaking type of ceiling here for Devon Achane. And then a couple more guys in tier 2. My RB6 is going to be Derrick Henry. Might be low to some people. I think it's fair considering the fact that he was the RB4 last year, 19.8 points per game, like rushed for over 1,900 yards, 5.9 yards per carry, hit in the touchdown department, was second in carries, rush yards, touchdowns. So everything went right for Derrick Henry, right? It was a really strong season. He put up, nearly 20 points per game. I think ranking him any higher than where he finished last year would just seem a little bit odd because I don't think he has the receiving upside to really like throw him over like 21, 22 plus points per game. Plus, we have to consider the fact that he is an aging running back. I know the man's not human. He doesn't get hurt. He doesn't slip. But just the fact that I think his ceiling is kind of capped, I'm willing to rank him like a few spots lower than where he finished last year. And then my last guy here in tier 2 is going to be Ashton Genty. It looks like he's going to be a lock in the top 15. Obviously, he's going to be a rookie this upcoming season, is the clear running back 1 in the 2025 class. I just think he's a really well-rounded prospect. He has the workhorse frame. We saw him carry a huge workload in college. In 2024, we just saw the insane rushing production. Didn't have a ton of work through the air, but if we look back to 2023, he had, potentially equally as insane receiving production out of the backfield as he had rushing production in 2024. In today's NFL, you're just not seeing a ton of running backs get this type of draft capital that I think Genty's going to get. Since 2018, there have been 3 running backs drafted in the top 15. That was Saquon Barkley, who averaged 24 points per game as a rookie. You had Bijan Robinson, who averaged 14.5 points per game, was the running back 17. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, who averaged 16.1 points per game as the running back 8. I think those guys all went into interesting situations. For Saquon, I feel like he kind of got the usage that you would expect. A team's going to pay up, spend that elite draft capital. They're going to use him like a workhorse. Jahmyr Gibbs got drafted into the weird spot where he was pretty much getting RB2 usage, as a top 15 pick, which is pretty rare, if we're looking back on it. And then for Bijan, also just questionable usage, right? Like in a split with Tyler Algier when you're spending that crazy draft capital on him. So maybe you could make the case like I'm too high on Genti. We don't know, whoever drafts him, how they're going to use him. And I think that's fair. But I think more likely than not, he is going to be used as a workhorse. The volume's going to be there. He has the receiving capabilities, and I think he's going to have a really nice rookie season. So he is going to be in tier 2 for me. And then moving into tier 3, going to start off with Bucky Irving, someone who just had a super fun breakout rookie season as like a day 3 pick, undersized, not a great athlete. Like that archetype is not doing well in the NFL, and he completely broke the mold there. And we kind of saw his season develop over 3 stages. So the first 5 games wasn't overly involved, averaged 8.3 points per game. Then the next 4, usage started to pick up, averaged 14.3. And then in his last 7 healthy games, he averaged over 20 PPR points per game. Now, there's always going to be some risk when you're drafting these day 3 running backs and you're kind of expecting them to hold on to the lead role. We've seen guys like James Robinson, Elijah Mitchell, where they kind of break out early on. The team didn't invest a ton in them, and then the team's already looking to replace them, bringing in a Travis Etienne, trading for a Christian McCaffrey. But I think he played well enough as a rookie, and I also kind of just trust this Bucs front office. I think they're pretty sharp, and so I do think they're going to continue to roll with Bucky Irving here. I will say they lost Liam Cohen. I don't love that, but the talent is clearly there, and I think he's going to be a fantasy RB1 heading into 2025. Then I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs here as my running back 9. Ended up finishing as the running back 7 in points per game. Kind of had a disappointing season and then was just catapulted up the ranks with 3 impressive games to close out the year, where he put up 39.8, 27.6, and then 25 PPR points. I do just think Jonathan Taylor is going to have capped upside on this offense with Anthony Richardson. The receiving production is not going to be there. I think the touchdown upside is going to be capped with A-Rich kind of vulturing near the goal line. But I do think this offense is going to run through him. I think the Colts are going to look at the monster games he had towards the end of last year. I think he's going to be the focal point of this offense. But in terms of fantasy production, if the receiving usage isn't there and he's not just completely dominating in the touchdown department, I think it's going to be tough for him to reach like 21, 22, 23 plus points per game, which is kind of what we're hoping for, or at least like having the potential to get at the running back position. And then after JT, we're going to go with Josh Jacobs here. Had a really solid fantasy season in his first year with the Packers, 17.2 points per game. I think what's interesting about Josh Jacobs is that I was someone who was kind of low on him throughout most of the offseason. I didn't really love the landing spot. LaFleur is someone who's consistently tried to push a committee, whether that was with like Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, even with the Titans where he had Derrick Henry. Like he had Derrick Henry in a split with Dion Lewis. And I eventually kind of came around just because the guy who I thought would be his committee member, Marshawn Lloyd, was just not able to stay on the field. Like he just could not get in. I think he ended up playing like 1 game. It was just always something where he was in and out of practice, in and out of the lineup, and he just couldn't gain any consistency. He couldn't really get on the field. Even despite that though, right? Like they spent a day 2 pick on a guy like Marshawn Lloyd. Josh Jacobs still had a sub 70% opportunity share. Now, a 69% opportunity share certainly isn't terrible, but when you look at the supporting cast he had, like the running backs behind him, these are not some like big names. They're not some like top prospects. So I still think LaFleur kind of showed signs of wanting a committee. Even with that being said, like Josh Jacobs dominated the goal line touches. He was 3rd in red zone touches, 4th in total touchdowns. The receiving usage wasn't great. He was 26th in target share. So I think he's going to be a fine like back-end RB1. I do think if Marshawn Lloyd can, kind of get it together health-wise, I think we could see him have some involvement in this backfield, but I think obviously Jacobs is going to be leading it, and so he's going to be a back-end RB1 for me. Now moving into tier 4, definitely some interesting names in this tier. I'm going to start off with Chase Brown. He's someone who I moved down at least a few spots from my video right after the season. And I'll say, like, if he can survive the draft and the Bengals don't bring in real competition, then he'll definitely jump back up. We saw in the 8 games without Zach Moss, he averaged 20.6 points per game. They used him as a workhorse. He's going to be tied to a top offense with Joe Burrow. They just signed Jamar Chase, just re-signed T. Higgins. So if Chase Brown can, fend off like a day 2 pick, round 3 pick, like round 4, maybe we're a little bit worried, but if he can like head into the season looking like the clear-cut RB1, he will be higher for me. It's kind of the similar thing with Bucky Irving, where it's like the day 3 picks, there's just not a ton of security. I don't know if I want to trust this Bengals front office to like do the right thing and just roll with him. You got a solid running back at, a cheap price in the draft. Like, don't burn more capital trying to bring in competition, but we'll just have to wait and see. But like I said, he will move up if he doesn't get legit comp. And then my running back 12 is going to be Breece Hall. Overall, just a pretty rough 2024 season. Finished as the running back 17 in points per game. Was being drafted pretty consistently as like the running back 2, running back 3. And like process-wise, that seemed like the right call, right? Like once he was fully cleared from his torn ACL in 2023, he was a monster, like 20 PPR points per game, a year removed from a torn ACL on a terrible offense. So you're looking at the situation, you have Aaron Rodgers coming in, you're expecting the overall ceiling of this offense to improve, you're expecting an efficiency bump, you're expecting a touchdown bump, and it's just like everything went wrong. He didn't get the efficiency bump, he did not get a boost in the touchdown department. His overall volume also decreased, his carries per game, his targets per game. And then looking at 2025, you have Justin Fields coming in, which isn't great. Typically you get the mobile quarterbacks. They're going to vulture near the goal line. They're also not going to be as willing to check down. So I think Breece is a super talented player. I think he has like that workhorse, 3-down skill set. I just don't think he's in a great spot here. And coming off a tough 2024, it's just tough for me to rank him any higher than this. Right after Breece, I have Chuba Hubbard, and he's someone who I think might be undervalued heading into the 2025 season. I was not super high on him heading into the season. I was someone who was pretty optimistic that Jonathan Brooks will be able to make his way back, really kind of break out as the workhorse. That did not happen, and the Panthers have, since come out and committed to Chuba Hubbard kind of long-term here. He signed a 4-year extension at $8 million per year, which is pretty solid money at the running back position. Now, they did go out and sign Rico Dowdle this offseason, who had a really solid season with the Cowboys, but it's a 1-year deal. He's going to be making less than Chuba Hubbard. You have Jonathan Brooks, who is very likely going to be out for the entire 2025 season. And then you look at the usage that Chuba Hubbard got last year. He had a 78% opportunity share. That's 5th in the NFL. He averaged over 20 opportunities per game. And then his last 12 games of the season, once he really kind of pulled away from Miles Sanders in that backfield, he averaged 17.6 points per game. We know Dave Canales likes to use a workhorse. We saw it last year with Chuba Hubbard. We saw it the year before with Rachaad White. So with no Jonathan Brooks, the fact that they committed to Chuba Hubbard, Bryce Young, took some huge leaps towards the end of last year. I think Chuba Hubbard's in a really interesting spot heading into next season. Then my running back 14, someone who I'm probably going to be lower on in consensus, it's going to be Kyren Williams. And when we look at his last couple of seasons, this is going to seem like a pretty disrespectful ranking, right? Even last year, where maybe he didn't smash expectations, he was still the running back 10 at 17 points per game. He was 3rd in opportunity share, so the workload was great. He was 1st in red zone touches, 4th in touchdowns. I just think of all the guys I have here in the top 15, I feel like his usage is like the most at risk. And it's such a weird thing because it's not like he could go from complete workhorse to like, just clear lead back. I mean, that could be the shift, right? But I think he's at risk of just completely losing the starting spot. Like, I think we have to remember how he got this job in the first place. People were expecting Cam Akers to just be the clear workhorse. All of a sudden, week 1, they're in like a 50-50 split. And then Kyren Williams is just like completely dominating this backfield. And I just don't think he's played well enough that we can feel 100% confident that there's not going to be some like wacky flip in the 2025 season. Like the Rams went out, they spent a day 2 pick on a guy like Blake Corum. Could Blake Corum potentially break into this backfield? I think he could. And honestly, like just speaking logically, I don't think Kyren Williams was so amazing last year that it's like we need to force feed this guy, every single touch when you have a guy like Blake Corum who could come in, kind of split that workload. Also, the fact that the receiving usage isn't great. Like even if he does maintain that role, I have him at running back 14. He finished RB10 last year. Like you're not sacrificing a ton. Obviously, the year before that, he had a much better overall finish. But those are kind of my concerns with Kyren Williams. I think the usage just feels a little bit shaky, and like, could he go out and keep it? Sure, but I just think compared to these other guys, like the floor seems like it could really fall out from underneath him. And then the final guy in my top 15, going to go with James Cook here. Had a really nice year 3, running back 11 in points per game. I think the overall concern here for James Cook is just the lack of like elite ceiling. So he was at 15.4 opportunities per game. That's fine, but that's not like, dominant usage. He really hit in the touchdown department, 18 touchdowns, and that was with Josh Allen kind of running for 12, kind of vulturing near the goal line. But he was still only 25th in opportunity share. I don't think he's ever going to be someone that's like unleashed as a workhorse, at least here with the Bills. Now it seems like he might be having like a contract dispute. That could be something that's kind of, looming heading into next season. So just like the limited upside, the fact that I don't think he has that mid-tier RB1 or better ceiling, that's why I'm going to have him lower than maybe some people would expect after his nice 2024. And then I'll just kind of run through a couple of names for honorable mentions. We have Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Kenneth Walker. Joe Mixon, you're just kind of banking on elite usage. Obviously, the offensive line is potentially even a bigger concern than it was during last season. Alvin Kamara, it seems like the wheels could fall off at any point, but he just continues to get force-fed. Great receiving production, logged another really nice fantasy season in 2024. And then for Kenneth Walker, talented player, there's just been so much shakeup with the Seahawks offense. You have an offensive coordinator change, a quarterback change, the wide receivers have been shuffled. And then when we look at last year, like he had a really strong start to the season. We were seeing great receiving usage. And then towards the end of the season, like Kenneth Walker, the run game, the Seahawks offense as a whole kind of fell off, kind of, were faltering. So we'll see what he looks like heading into next year. We'll see what the new OC looks like in terms of like what the split's going to be between him and Charbonnet. But those would be my guys that, kind of just missed out on the top 15. Thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed, hit that like button. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next one.